Welcome to Terry's Doing It, a podcast where we learn about the efforts of inspirational people who seize the day, carpe diem. My guest today is Tim Cahill. He wrote for Rolling Stone magazine in its early days in San Francisco. He was the founding editor and editor-at-large for Outside Magazine. He's interviewed rock stars, toured with the Allman Brothers. He interviewed Stanley Kubrick, O.J. Simpson, and many others. He's also written 10 books, one of them about serial killer John Wayne Gacy, and 9 in the adventure travel literature genre. Heck, he invented that genre. Tim teaches aspiring travel writers. I met him at the Book Passage Travel Writers and Photographers Conference in Corte Madera in 2019. Sorry, I have to adjust my headphones here. In the process of his career, he's accrued many labels. He's been called America's best known and funniest adventure travel writer, a working class hero, the Godfather of Travel Writing, the wise guy of travel lit Lite. I think that's my favorite, and an apostle of irreverence and a Mishap Maestro. I fondly call him Tim freaking Cahill. He's why many of us write about travel. Tim's partner, Nancy, couldn't be with us today, but if she had been, I would ask her about a project she worked on. I had a little part in it. For Tim's 80th birthday last November, he asked a few of us to write a paragraph or two that she was going to publish in a book for Tim. Tim, is the book out?
She's still working on it.
Well, you had a lot of responses, so it could be volumes.
Yeah. And Nancy asked the very generous contributors to keep it short, but, it's been a long life, and it's been, there's a lot of people that I remember fondly that I haven't seen in a long time that were happy to contribute.
And only too happy, right?
Yeah, it was really, it was a great birthday present. The best I've had since I got a sled as a kid.
Well deserved. Let me ask you, how did you meet Nancy and bring her to Livingston, Montana, or did she live there already?
We met here in Livingston. She was in New York. She was working as a journalist. She was actually working for Time magazine in New York City. Decided that she was going to take some time off and see the country a little bit. And like a lot of people here in the mountains, she got here and kind of got stuck. That was back in the 90s. I was here. I'd come here in the 80s. And at one time, she was working for the local paper. I met her on some assignment that I don't recall, and things went on from there. So,
well, she seems to have scrubbed the internet, because I could find literally no trace of her anywhere except on Facebook.
Well, when she had her, when she was at Time magazine, she had just graduated from college, and she got a job. She was running their internal newsletter, and she was working with all the best photographers from Life, Time at the time. But get this, she had an office at Time in New York.
Oh my!
With a stocked liquor cabinet.
Wow. Well, she never. I'm flummoxed, because she sits very quietly next to you at the conference, the Travel Writers Conference, and I didn't even know she was a journalist.
Yeah, she worked as a journalist in Jackson Hole for quite some time, and she likes to consider herself more of a photographer than a writer, but she did some amazing stories. There's one of a family murder there that she really worked on for over a year. So she'd done some journalism. She doesn't do it much anymore.
The San Diego Union Tribune said once that you write with precision of John McPhee and Joan Didion, tempered by a Monty Python-esque sense of the absurd. How does she keep your feet on the ground, Tim?
It's easy.
Oh, my gosh. Well, your career and your accomplishments are beyond impressive.
Thank you.
How do you handle the adulation?
How do I handle the adulation? Sometimes you've done it. I'm sure you meet a movie star or something, and you just like you get a little tongue tied or something like that, and but you get to know the person, and I have. There's friends of mine that are big stars.
Tom McGuane.
Well, Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
You get to know them. They're just ordinary people, and people who write or want to be in my profession. They may have some degree of adulation, and it. I'm happy about it, yes, but it's. I keep thinking that's not me.
Yeah.
Let's just talk. So, yeah, I feel a little embarrassed about it.
Sure.
But happily, it doesn't happen all that often.
Sure. Well, so you earned a BA at the University of Wisconsin at Madison in European Intellectual History. What is that?
I said that, but I don't think there is such a. It was in history, and the main part of what I did in history was European intellectual history. But don't ask me about it. I don't.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I am going to ask you about that, Tim, because Yale Online defines intellectual history as intertwining conversations where questions not easily or ever answered are posed. Isn't that what you do?
Well,
still today,
it could be what I do, but what history is really just a compendium of stories. And what I am is a storyteller and a reader of stories. And so to me, history was reading stories. The intellectual part of it, I think, had a lot to do with what were the intellectual underpinnings of the Holocaust. And but that was a while ago, and I have my ideas, but it's.
But I still see you trying to figure out what it all means, examining intellectual underpinnings in the process.
I think I do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's especially later on in my career. Earlier in my career as an outside kind of journalist, I did a lot of things basically because they were difficult or it was a thrill and I wanted to accomplish them. Later on, it occurred to me that I ought to think about what it all means. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you're also competitive. You not only uh, amassed several swimming championships. You drove from Tierra del Fuego all the way to Alaska and set a record, I think, that still stands.
As far as I know, it still stands. But they ought to be able to break it because we did that back in 1987. And I've been to various places in South America where I was then, and the roads are quite a bit better. They are, you know, not rutted cow paths. They're actual paved highways. So somebody should do that. The problem with, people think, oh, you drive from Ushuaia, Argentina to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska in 26 days. It's, well, why don't you stop and smell the flowers? What kind of weird thing is this? If you open up that book, on the first page is the acknowledgments. And what I say there is a journey is best measured in friends rather than miles. And there's about 70 or 80 people there that needed to be thanked. Now, these are all people that I met and helped us on the trip. Well, why do you need all these people to help you on the trip? Well, there's 13 borders you got to cross. That's 26 different sets of customs that you got to do. And for this book, we'd gone to England, talked to the Guinness Book of Records people and said, what are the rules? Well, the rules are it starts when it starts and it ends when you get there, and everything in between is your problem. So if you get stopped at the border, that counts as your time. So we went down to South America and Central America and greased every possible border that we could.
Ahead of time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it took probably 6 months. And then the drive, was there. There was basically shooting war between Costa Rica and, Nicaragua and Honduras, and El Salvador wasn't a place you wanted to go at that time. And so, there was a lot of, it had to be planned as carefully as a bank robbery.
So you were sort of a Butch and Sundance sort of couple going through North and South America.
And actually, I did go to Butch and Sundance's house down in South America.
Did you? What'd you find there?
It's a typical log cabin. A carpenter can tell you better than I can, but the windows are done the way North Americans do them, not the way South Americans do. So it's a nice 2-bedroom. It's kind of falling into disrepair, and there's not. Well, at the time I was there was. It was just an abandoned place, beautiful place, nice cabin, mountain with a glacier gleaming on its shoulder up top, a trout stream running by it. It was a very nice place. A meadow at the time I was there, just full of flowers and the buzzing of bees. It was quite a nice place.
Well, I hazard a guess that you never could have imagined as a child who was reluctant to admit to wanting to write, that you saw yourself in that kind of a place. I read that you thought that writers were godlike and that admitting that you wanted to be one was kind of arrogant.
Exactly. Where I grew up, in a little town in Wisconsin, there was nobody who was a writer, and I had nobody to emulate. And when I discovered reading and became infatuated with being able to read, I just imagined these people uh, writing these things that thrilled me, and they had to be godlike
Mhm.
to be able to create such a thing. And of course, now it's been my life for over 50 years, and I know quite a few writers, and I can tell you we're not very godlike.
Yeah. But I can see that early fascination with words
Oh yeah,
must have led you down that path. I
yeah,
also think that those students at Waukesha High School now have somebody to emulate and to try to follow, and that's great.
yeah. Uh, Waukesha,
Waukesha, thank you.
Waukesha. Uh, if you ask anybody what I did when I was in high school, they say, "Oh, he was a swimmer."
Mm.
I was, I was able to win the state championship uh, in swimming freestyle sprints, uh, and that earned me a scholarship to the University of Wisconsin, which is
And that's kind of humble, I think, because it was a full ride scholarship, was it not?
it was partial grant and aid, but
Partial
it got
grant.
grant and aid. It's called
You just can't
athletic.
trust the internet. This is the second time I've said something with great authority in these interviews that is not true. Won't be the last.
I know that it's on the internet, but
Yeah. You
I
didn't
also
do it.
correct. I don't take the I don't take the time to go and correct things. You know, I wish it was a full ride. It was
Yeah,
partial aid, but it was athletic grant and aid. But it got me through school.
sure. Well, there was a point at the university where you enrolled in law school until I guess it was one fateful day when a law school professor complimented you and it changed everything. Tell me about that.
Well, I'd been uh, in. I graduated from Wisconsin. I really wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to give it a try. I'd had um, some hideously bad creative writing classes, and uh, I thought I could do better. Uh, but really, what was I going to do for a living? Um, and I thought, well, I'll go to law school. And I got in at the University of Wisconsin and did uh, my first semester. Um, I can remember that there was a picture of me and someone else in the uh, in the local paper, Madison paper, uh, that showed me in a blazer, a sport coat with a shirt and tie, and I was wearing jeans and
Wait,
boots.
sorry.
And they took this picture as if this was the weirdest thing they'd ever seen. Somebody with a blazer uh, and uh, talking about the dress code at law school.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but sorry. And uh, the semester was over, or just about over, and I was asked by this professor, this very scary, smart, paper chase type of professor, to please come in and talk to him. And I did. And he did compliment me. He said, "This is one of the 5 best briefs I've ever gotten from a first year law student." And I was saying, wow, because I thought I was going to be dressed down for not dressing up.
Right.
And I can remember it was Wisconsin in the winter, and I was walking back to my apartment, and there was snow on the ground, and I was kind of trudging along, and I said, "What am I depressed for? Why does this depress me?" And it was because, look, if this goes on, you are definitely going to be a lawyer, and you never gave this writing thing a shot. you've got to do this. And so I dropped out of law school. I figured it's something I could do. I could probably do that. But I dropped out of law school and went to San Francisco to be a writer. Now, if I knew anything about the publishing industry, I would have gone to New York. But I did go to San Francisco. I did go to San Francisco State University, got a degree in creative writing, a master's, and started writing. And there was this little startup magazine there in San Francisco called Rolling Stone. And I got a job with them. The job was described to me as editorial drudge.
Well, it was a magazine that every self-respecting teenager in America read religiously.
Yes.
It became very successful.
Not only that, everybody read it at the time. The newscaster, CBS newscaster Dan Rather said, "It makes me wonder what I've been doing in journalism." You can't imagine the people who wanted to write for us. As a year or two progressed, it was very easy to step up the stairs at Rolling Stone. I went from editorial drudge to associate editor within a couple of months, and then writing and editing. But we got queries, people who wanted to write for us, and you would look at the thing, and generally, if they had their resume up front, generally those weren't the people that but the resume would be like, I was a speechwriter for the president. I was the Pope of Rome for 4 years, and then you would get to their writing and say, nope. So we turned a lot of people down.
So you went to San Francisco originally because you were interested in creative writing, in fiction.
Exactly.
And I assume that you planned to write the great American novel.
Precisely.
Okay, what was it about?
The novel that I wrote for my master's thesis. Hopefully it's lost. It's certainly lost to me. I imagine someone could go find it in the files. It's not digitized, thank God. I wrote a very terrible novel about some guy in San Francisco who was a hippie and liked rock music and wanted to go to Kathmandu and was full of all kinds of unspecified ox.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to guess you've never been tempted to do
not do that. Do not do that to me.
Okay. Well, so your path, it seems, from graduate student to working journalist went pretty quickly. I did read somewhere where 1 month you were working in the kitchen of a hotel, chafing under the chef, and the next you were the guest at a catered reception that he prepared. How did that feel?
It felt pretty good. I was in the kitchen. I had no idea who the guy. I was washing pots and pans, and we were slammed, and I was working really hard washing these pots and pans and sloshing some water down on the duck boards behind me. And this guy came through, and he slipped on the duck boards and spoke to me in what I thought was a disrespectful tone, and I replied equally disrespectfully. I should have said, "Yes, chef." because he was chef.
Mm.
And momentarily, I don't know, a little bit thereafter, probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes, there was a knock on the kitchen door. Two guys in suits said, "Chef, may we come in?" They came to me and gave me my check to that moment and said, "You won't be needed anymore." So, this was the Mark Hopkins Hotel, which is,
It's a big
they have
deal.
presidential suites that
Right.
presidents actually
Mm-hmm.
stay in.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, about 6 or 8 months later, I was at Rolling Stone. I'd gotten my job, and I believe it was Creedence Clearwater had a big party. It was the age of rock and roll decadence, and they had a big party in one of the presidential suites, and I was eating oysters Rockefeller in the Mark Hopkins, where I'd just been fired. And people have always asked me, did you send your compliments to the chef? And
Did
no,
you?
I didn't do
No,
anything. I just said it was a wonderful turn of fortune.
because you're a humble guy.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to get at that time.
Well, so what year did you arrive in the city?
When did I arrive in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Uh, the winter after the summer of love.
I was wondering if you made it for that. You missed it.
Yeah, just by 6 months or so.
Oh, wow. Was it still the only place to be as far as you were concerned? I mean, why didn't you go to graduate school in Oklahoma?
Um, it probably should have gone to Kansas or Iowa. They've got some really good schools. I guess because I just wanted something different. I grew up in a small town. I, Madison, the University of Wisconsin, they had 30, 40,000 students. It's a big place, but you lived in your own little bubble of, especially if you're an athlete, just like double practices and stuff. And I kind of wanted a big city experience, but I didn't want a New York experience. I don't know why. I wanted a West Coast experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a song about going to San Francisco with flowers in your hair.
Yes, I remember that.
Right.
Scott McKenzie. I actually grew up about 3.5 hours north of San Francisco. And so during that time period when you were at Rolling Stone, and so I was paying close attention. But instead of being a novelist, you did veer off into journalism with Rolling Stone. After a number of years, well, it was about 10 years, I guess, you wrote a book called Buried Dreams in '86 about John Wayne Gacy's murders of 33 young boys. You called that the turning point of your career. Explain.
Well, let me explain one thing before I start on that. And that is, yes, I wanted to be a novelist. I did not train as a journalist. When I got my job at Rolling Stone, one of the things that happened at Rolling Stone is that we felt we had to be 100% accurate because we were doing a kind of alternative journalism. And I had not trained as a journalist, so I had to learn to.
Would you call that new journalism? Is that
It was new journalism, but here's the deal: I didn't know how to write journalism. I knew how to write fiction, and I knew how to tell stories, carpenter together scenes, use dialogue, and that's what I did. I used the techniques of fiction to report journalistically, and that was what was called new journalism. I did it unconsciously. I didn't say, I'm going to be a new journalist now.
Mm-hmm.
In the in learning journalism, I did all kinds of stories. I did stories about movie stars, Clint Eastwood or Mariel Hemingway or Dustin Hoffman, Stanley Kubrick, Carol Ballard, who wrote directed Never Cry Wolf. I did a little bit of politics. I hated politics. I wasn't good at it.
Why do you think that is?
Basically because politicians, for the most part, are not going to let you into their lives and tell a story. They have kind of canned responses, and you never feel like you, in interviewing a politician, you never feel like you got to the real person.
Right.
And I really am not that fascinated with politics, about the machinations of, we do this in the House and we do this in the Senate. I just didn't really care. So I wasn't good at politics. So I tried, I did a couple of investigative stories. One of them was, I did one about the Tony and Susan Alamo Christian Foundation, which was a very destructive cult. Tony Alamo recently passed away in jail after marrying a number of young girls from 8 to 14. So he got life plus finally. But I wrote a story about him, and that led to when Jonestown's happened and 1,000 people died down there.
And I've got some questions to hold that thought, because we're going to go there too.
All right. So what happened is that I had I was doing all kinds of things, and I thought, well, I'll do investigative journalism. And so I had this in to some people that had some information on Gacy, and so I did the book. It was good. It was a national bestseller. It was a pretty good book. But it took me 3 years, and I had to live in the sewer of this man's mind. I tried to do it from his point of view. I tried to see things the way he saw things. And this is not, for me, it was not psychologically a good place to be. Now, because it sold well, every new whack job that came down the pike, they said, well, do you want to do Jeffrey Dahmer? No, I don't want to do any more of this.
Yeah.
This was it was like a tour of the sewers in a glass bottom boat. I don't want to do this.
So was it the turning point of your career in a professional sense when more success kind of came?
No. Yes, it was. It was because the book sold well. It was a turning point in that I said to myself, I never want to do this again. I'd probably be a rich man, but very twisted and unhappy if I made that my life. But yes, it was a turning point in that it sold a lot of books, and they said, what else do you have? And Outside Magazine had started, and I had all these outside stories. I said, put them together in a collection. And they did it.
Wow.
And so that made a turning point in my life, that because I had a serial killer book that sold a lot of things, they were able to do outside adventure stories just on the strength of my name. If I tried to sell that straight up at that time, it wouldn't have sold. There was a joke among the outdoor writers that New York doesn't publish books with trees in them.
That's probably true. They don't see many, right? No, that's terrible. We have listeners in New York. So in retrospect, Tim, I'm I'm thinking maybe it wasn't a good place to be, but you would have opened and walked through that door had you known then what you know now.
Maybe it certainly showed me what I didn't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you said it was an attempt to isolate an oft repeated pattern of serial killers. And I'm wondering, Tim, what is the pattern so I can avoid them?
um, yeah. Well, it's in the ones that I had studied that had anything to do with the Gacy case. It's always a sexual thing. It's always some kind of repression on the part of the person that's doing the killing. It's you know, Gacy, for instance, uh, was was gay, and he couldn't handle it. He believed that he should be uh, a very macho fellow, and the the boys that appealed to him, he blamed them for
it. Well, so similarly, I think your story about the aftermath of Jamestown, you entered that story with some questions. And what were those questions and what did you take away from it?
Well, the obvious question is why did 900 and some people voluntarily drink the Kool-Aid? And if I'm going to be journalistically accurate, it was not Kool-Aid. It was something called Lick-O-Maid.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the story I tried to write, and I think I did a pretty good job on that one.
Well, I read it last night again for the second time, and your account is incredibly graphic. But I think it had to be to communicate the horror of that place and what happened there. How did you learn to purge what you heard, touched, tasted, and felt in the coming years, or have you really?
I believe I have. It took a while, and it was a large news event that everybody had heard about worldwide, and I got asked about it all the time. Let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah, please.
There were several people who, Jonestown people, who saw this was beginning to happen, and they got out. And they were put in this place called the Park Hotel. And most of the journalists stayed in a big fancy hotel.
Was that just before Ryan got there? They left ahead of that?
This was after I went there after the
okay.
thing. I was there 2 days after it happened.
Okay.
And so these people were in the hotel, and you would go down for lunch, you would sit there, and there was one fellow, Howard Bogue.
Mm-hmm.
Howard was
the father of Tina Bogue, with whom I went to high school.
No kidding.
Yes.
Did she die at Jonestown?
Her mother put her siblings into the shower at the Park Hotel and slit their throats, I think.
At the Park Hotel?
Was it wherever they took the folks who were, or maybe they went ahead of the thing, but she was, yeah.
I don't know about that. I believe that that Howard tried to get them to go with him, and they wouldn't, and they died there.
Okay.
That is my...
No, it was Leanne. What was Leanne's last name? Yeah, it wasn't Tina Boak. They were best friends, the two young girls. And Leanne Harris, the Harrises, were the ones, I think, that the mother slashed their throats.
Jeez. I didn't know about that part. I
Yeah.
know that Harold Bogue's family died. Here's the story. Here's the reason that I'm telling this story. As I talked to Howard Bogue and was getting the, what happened in the final moments, what happened, and he was a man whose family had just voluntarily killed themselves, that wouldn't leave with him. That you can't imagine this. And I'm looking at him, and the American government had sent in this team of psychologists, trauma psychologists, to deal with these people. And I went to one of the psychologists and I said, "Look, here we are. Howard's down here. I'm worried about this guy. I'm really worried about this guy because we're just sitting here asking him, and he's telling us over and over and over again." And the trauma psychologist said to me, "That's what we do.
Yeah.
It's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do. We get them to tell the stories over and over again until it gets calluses on it."
Mm.
And not a decade ago or so, I got an email actually from Howard Bogue saying, "Thank you for being there."
Wow.
And I assumed that all I was doing my job. But you're asking me how I got over Jonestown. I did the same thing. I talked about it because people wanted to ask me, why? People wanted to ask me. I just told the story over and over and over again. And you never get over it, but you put some calluses on the story.
Sure. Well, as you have practiced your craft of writing, I've watched you in several situations, and I've seen that you have an innate ability to blend in with your subjects. And I listened to the Stanley Kubrick interview last night, and I could hear you doing the same thing with him, trying to connect with him. He was a little cagey. I think it's maybe a little difficult. Maybe it improved after I clicked off, but I think you're able to disarm people through familiarity and shared humor so that they relax, they trust you, and they open up. And then you jump in and become a part of whatever's in front of you. Is that a conscious thing, or is that, do you have to work it up, or does it just happen?
Well, you better know everything if you're going to go interview anybody, you better know all the questions they've been asked before and how they answer them and all of that. You have nasty little journalist techniques, like you tell stories. So it's movie star X. I know you don't want to talk about the divorce. Hell, I just got one myself. Well, you know what she did to me? She did this and this and this. And the people just want to top your story. You tell them that, I'm a journalist and I'm taking notes, but it's amazing the things that they might tell you. There's a couple of ways of being a journalist. And my good friend, Ben Fong Torres, he has a list of notes, and he was a radio announcer.
Right.
And still is. And he sounds like totally professional. And if you listen to his interviews, it sounds like you're on a professional radio program, and he's got the questions, boom, 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 and I think his subjects feel like I'm in the hands of a pro. I'm going to answer as me. I like to just and the Kubrick thing. I got a call from a guy who does a site about Kubrick, and he said, "You've got the last interview with Kubrick." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Could I have that?" And I said, "Sure." He took it. He kind of cleaned it up, but it was just for me, for my journalistic purposes. If you listen to it, you would hear that uh, uh, the cassette tape recorder is next to Kubrick. You can't hear my questions most of the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
But listen, Kubrick was going to talk to me for 15 minutes. We talked for 2 hours.
Yes. Yes.
And if you listen to the first part of the Kubrick interview, the first thing he says is, "I'm not going to be asked any conceptualizing questions, am I?" And I laughed out loud. I said, "I thought I had to." He said, "Every interview with you is all conceptualizing questions." And he said, "Yeah, but not by me." So we ended up talking about pro football. We ended up talking about whether he drives a car. We talked about the rumors of him. He talked about the art of editing. It's actually a very wonderful interview. When I listen to it, I love listening to Kubrick explaining how he edits and why he edits and why editing is an art in itself. Yeah.
I didn't get quite to that part when I listened. I think
It was 2 hours long.
Yeah, I think he was still trying to get his feet under him with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be.
Well, so another thing that you told Rolf Potts one time is that about writing, one way to write is simply to chronicle events. And you think that it constitutes a failure of imagination. And then you say the events will work themselves into a story if you think about them enough. It's like holding up a prism to the sun. Turn it in just the right way, and a rainbow of light pours through. That's a great vision of what happens.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Is that, it is the process in a nutshell, isn't it?
It is. It is. You just have to, my process is I take voluminous notes,
Copious
notes, copious and voluminous. and I take copious notes, and I come home and I read them over. And I read them over several times. I try to at least a couple of times read them over just before I go to sleep and let that come out. But yeah, I don't mean to say that every book or article that's done chronologically is a failure of imagination. There's many good ones.
Well, it has a purpose for a certain outcome.
I was talking to a class at Scripps the other day, and this young lady said, the story I want to do is we got in trouble on this hike way out in the middle of nowhere, and so how do I do that? Well, one way you could do it is say, well, I met my friend 20 years ago, or 10 years ago at so-and-so, and we've been friends for a long time. Oh, is that the way to start the story? No, just break the timeline. Say, my friend Amy and I were stuck in the forest. She was bleeding. We were 20 miles from nowhere. Boom, 2-line break. And I met Amy several years ago, and we've been friends. And then back and forth like that. So that's a better, quicker, or I think a better way to tell a story.